The Lords of War. Cristo is the most hotly contested planet in all of the Materium, indeed, in all of the Tellurian domain. A god would rather lose an entire solar system than suffer a single conversion on Cristo, though the only reason for this is because it was the first planet they conquered. And Cristo is a planet of ley lines and portals. So, it was not hard to imagine there was a war, known as the Trojan War, the Kuruk-Stretcher War, the Xian War. In fact, these were all mere theaters of that war, which involved gods in strange ways. Gods whose dogmas stood totally opposed, united with one another. Gods sponsored competing armies. Gods almost went to war. Kali, the incarnation of the Yuga, had chosen to come to mortal form. But Kali spent his time across many different bodies, all sharing Kali as their soul. When he would leave this body of Duryodhana to become Eris, the one was now without a soul, but still replete with a body and a spirit. This is not so surprising. After all, it is the duty of each Yuga to establish themselves as a presence across the 9 worlds and 8 planes to set the stage. There were 17 adventurers. Our scholars do not know their origin, or who they were. Each of them were tempted by Kali to come to the Rosastan, to brave the monastery of Leng, to drink from Mimir's well. How did Kali do this? Kali had interrupted each of their weddings and played a gambling game. Was going to the Rosastan their reward or their punishment? I will not tell you. Nor will I now confirm or deny if these men were heroes from ancient elven times, or the personification of the Materium, or perhaps some subplanes, as some have suspected. Though they were not called this at the time, history will remember them as the Lords of War. They were named Nimrod, Sind-Katar, Kahok, Karen, Sarna Kolarian, Dravid, Kintu, Kerma, Uwati, Sitka, Teton Catalba, Mana Largena, Runap, Yukon, Turin Nuru, Kiara, and Kiviuk. They had sacrificed their very memories in order to drink from Mimir's well. When they had awoken, a strange figure stood before them. It said it was the last messenger of the god that failed. It said that it was the leader of the Watchers. It said that it was he who taught the arts of cosmetics. It was he who turned the tool of the axe into the weapon of war. It told these men riddles of the occult war. It told them of the keepers of secrets, those guardians of ancient elven ruins. It said that it would only be through the merciless destruction of this group that one could find peace. Reader's note: at this point in his presentation, Tom K. flashed the image of Semyaza as the angel of history into the minds of his audience. From Mimir, these men learned all kinds of wise sayings. A stupid man's report of what a clever man says could never be accurate because he unconsciously translates what he hears into something he can understand. I have never done anything useful. No discovery of mine has made, or is likely to make, directly or indirectly, for good or ill, the least difference to the amenity of the world. It is never worth a first-class man's time to express a majority opinion. By definition, there are plenty of others to do that. These men, who became able to see the entire thing, knew that an open mind was like a fortress with its gates unbarred and unguarded. They knew that knowledge was a power, and to hide it well. But this figure contextualized their wisdom. It was time to embark on a brave new world, to drown the old world in blood once more. It assured them of what would be the path forward. So, in the year 2708, the Lords of War traveled to Neken and Kumat. Here, they heard of the street preacher Imhotep, who claimed to be the last of the stargazers. They listened to him rave on, talking about all sorts of things. Every event in history, according to him, had been predicated and orchestrated by some malevolent force. Some things were older than they appeared to be. Other things were far younger. Cultic forces drove everything, and only pretended to be subservient to the gods. Imhotep told the Lords of War how they were leaving little clues across history. Sometimes this was boastful. Other times, these breadcrumb trails were simply patterns they had to look for. He looked towards coincidence and numerology, which was fate playing things, and disharmony, which was proof that things had been altered. But Imhotep never answered the question. Who is they? Imhotep disappeared. They did not know it, but he would return in 33 years. They saved his former house from strange-looking cultists who were trying to burn it to the ground. They looked through his affairs, diaries, and wills. He had apparently identified the hieroglyphic cult of Alexandria as a front for the keepers of secrets. The hieroglyphic cult was a cult of scribes who worshipped Alexandria, who focused on writing. Every 3 years, when Luna was first full in the 5th month, they would hold council to better manage the writing system. This was their entire religious duty. The Lords of War found that they were meeting in Abydos. The Lords of War disguised themselves, first as slaves to enter into the temple, and then later as scribes. They saw a sorceress give the opening speech, and they knew her to be Ogboinba. They engaged their fellow scribes in conversation, and found that none had ever heard of her. As the night progressed, all sorts of weird debauchery and sacrifices occurred. The 17 were separated. One by one, they were led to secret chambers. Ogboinba appeared to one of them, and told him that she knew what was happening, and that they would be the prime sacrifice of the night. He reached at her, and with a surprised glance that immediately turned into a cackle, she turned into sand. The bodyguards now turned to that man and came to attack, but he easily subdued them. He could not find his comrades, so he lit the place ablaze. There was mass panic. Many died, the rest fled. In Abydos, the Lords of War regrouped. They came together and returned to the fire. Here, they saw strange documents that seemed to imply only a few present had actually any connection to the Keepers of Secrets. All seemed to be lost. Imhotep seemed to be deranged. Then, a map was found. It was a strange map. It led all sorts of strange ways, and went through obstacles that could easily be circumnavigated. As they followed the map, the direction seemed to change. Finally, they found themselves in the vast wide ocean. There were many areas where it is impossible to see land, but here they knew that they were as far away from the shore as any could ever be. They came across this terrible island, which had a single monolith coming out of the top. They came ashore, destroyed the other vessels, and saw footsteps. When they followed the footsteps, they saw something their eyes could not believe. It was as if there was a large trapdoor on the ground, but made out of stone and over 2 miles wide, and it was open. They walked into it, and they saw bright lights of magenta and cyan following an Escherian path. They could not understand it, but it was like walking in outer space, heading for the suns. But with each step, they took a parsec, always over and undershooting, as the distance itself seemed to change. Out-of-tune musics play as their hands begin to smoke a cold fire. Their hands become tendrils. The size of their hands and eyes change. Colors fade in and out, revert, and go off by a pallet. Blood rains down, and then becomes vines, trying to kill them. Things are stuffed in non-Euclidean angles, and they journey inside themselves, literally. Here, they saw the black rainbow. When they walked across it, it was like walking across both a marsh and a desert. Arrhythmic echoes came about, but then they saw her, Ogboinba. She was surrounded by 13 shrouded disciples, and they prayed over a statue. The Lords of War readied their bows and shot 7 of them. The remaining 6, and their leader, snapped out of their trance and dropped their instruments. Immediately, tendrils shot out and took 2 of them. They started to flee. The Lords of War were readying their aim once more, but then they tasted a taste no mortal should taste. They too fled. The Lords of War and 4 of the apostles, alongside their priestess, escaped. They followed the same route, but instinct told them that they couldn't pass. They got through the trapdoor and returned to the surface once more, but the sky became pink with clouds. The Lords of War escaped to their vessel, leaving the other 5 there. As they looked back, they saw it. A monster of vaguely anthropoid outline, but with an octopus-like head, whose face was a mass of feelers, a scaly, rubbery-looking body, prodigious claws on hind and 4 feet, and long, narrow wings behind. With 2 claws, it grabbed 2 acolytes. The Lords of War increased their rowing and watched with horror. As the thing marched towards Ogboinba like a crawling mountain, she made some move with her body. The top of the monolith splintered off and landed on that thing. It smelled like that of a bursting, rotten bladder, but to witness it was beautiful. It was as if the being was made of light that is not light, in the dust that accompanies any avalanche. Ogboinba was lost. The Lords of War saw the creature recombining in the distance. They felt it was only a matter of time before it gave chase to them, but it never came. You may wonder, how could mere mortals have done this to dead Cthulhu, to Raleigh? Cthulhu sleeps, and we are but insects. But imagine in your sleep, a fly, or more likely, a mosquito, comes to bite you. You may move in your sleep, twist and turn, maybe sleep on your arm, or hit yourself a little too hard in your instinct. In the morning, none of that plays any relevance. When the Lords of War had returned to land, things were suddenly different. They were mere adventurers at the beginning. Now they came back, and suddenly they were each at the top of a very complicated pyramidal network. Every nation that is represented in our empire today has found their ancestors beholden to one of these 17. They had no idea how this occurred, but they instinctively took upon their reward. All these various oaths of Anas, which had conflicted in so many ways, had finally had need to be resolved. The world had selected for itself who to choose, and it had changed itself to put these men on top. The Trojan War had begun.